Is Christianity plausible? That's the question we're going to be asking today. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and I'm so glad you're here to watch and be a part of the channel. I came across a video by a guy named Alex O'Connor, and he's a well-known religious skeptic, kind of agnostic, but very interested in religion and religious debate. And he has a video from one of his like bonus channels, it looks like, called "I've realized Christianity is more plausible than I thought." And so it's kind of this idea that, like, really upon looking at the evidence, Christianity, while he's not claiming he believes it or thinks it's plausible, he thinks it's more plausible than he originally thought, which I think is an interesting window opening, because I actually think that's one of the most compelling things about the faith is that when you really look at the Christian faith, there's a tremendous amount of evidence around it that makes it quite plausible. And there's a lot of unique aspects to Christianity as well that make it, I think, more plausible. And so let's go ahead and dive right on into the video for today.
I talk about this and I debate this all the time, and I debate whether Jesus was God or whether he even claimed to be God and all of this kind of stuff. But for me, the undeniable thing is that there's this extraordinary historical figure who did
Mm,
something extraordinary. And there's
right.
something really weird that happened that caused a bunch of people to
Mm.
start quite early on worshipping him, which is a very strange thing to do to a human being, especially in a Jewish culture.
So I watched like the first 20 seconds of this video, so I had seen this section before, but this is pretty interesting to me. Um, he's saying, upon looking at the evidence, I found that Jesus was a historical figure for sure. And a bunch of Jewish people pretty early on were worshiping him as God, right? And so, in a Jewish context, that is a remarkable thing because monotheism is so central to Christianity or to Judaism, and not only monotheism, because Christianity is monotheistic, we worship three persons but one God, right? But the idea of God is totally separate from humanity in terms of holiness and all those things. Saying that a human being is God would be blasphemous. It's not even close to anything that has ever happened in Jewish history. And so it's pretty remarkable that widespread adoption among early Jewish people or early Jewish Christians, there was a widespread adoption of the idea of worshiping Jesus as God, right? That there was some sort of experience that they had that convinced them that that was the case, right? And Christians say, well, yeah, it was the resurrection, right? Like that was all the proof they needed that Jesus was who he said he was. He was the Messiah. He was the Son of the living God. He is God. He's the second person of the Trinity made flesh. So I think this is a really interesting observation that Alex is making.
Mm.
And so, to me, getting at the Gospels from a scholarly perspective helps me to understand who this historical figure was.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm really interested in, almost in the way that somebody might be really interested in Julius Caesar
Mm.
or in whether
Oh,
the
it's Bear Grylls. I love Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls is one of my favorite people. He's kind of I didn't even know he was going to be in this video, honestly. I saw maybe saw him in the thumbnail or something like that, but I didn't realize he's like in the interview with him. So that's really cool. Bear Grylls, yeah, it's kind of a hero of mine from my teenage years. Really person of strong faith. I remember this really compelling moment with Bear Grylls and his show Running Wild, where he would take celebrities out. And he actually took President Obama out into the wild. And there's this shocking moment where he's like, "Can I pray for you? You have the whole weight of the world on your shoulders. Can I pray for you?" And he was willing to do that on his Discovery Channel television show. And so a person of strong faith who lives it out, who and also just cool. He's like a survivalist and stuff. He's just a really cool guy.
Iliad, whether the Trojan War really happened and whether
Mm.
that kind of stuff. I sort of take this approach to
That feels
the
to me
Gospels.
like that was your point of entry.
Yes.
I also love how Bear Grylls, right? This like vision. This is like a perfect case in like what masculinity actually is, right? Like, a lot of dudes who have this very like masculine image that is a false masculinity and a toxic masculinity, like Andrew Tate, would probably never sit with a fluffy dog on their lap in a video. But I love how Bear Grylls has this cute little fluffy dog in his lap. It's awesome.
Yeah,
But you've had such a journey, and you've met so many amazing people, and you've debated so many different angles
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah.
Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, well, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot
What
on
does
my
that?
show.
What does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. It was
Yeah.
really popular. The debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism,
Yeah.
and it was this
Mm.
body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, and this kind of stuff, which was really popular, and it had this sort of quite strident.
The God delusion is the reason why Richard Dawkins is so maligned in the Christian community. To call people's faith a delusion is just really, really strong language, right? So, yeah.
This sort of quite strident, debate me, bro, kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate, and I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian. Some people say to me, like,
It's a funny word, though. That anyway.
yeah,
Like I'm less and less certain about the word.
yeah,
You know what somebody said to me the other day? You're like this. The period of greatest growth ever in the history of the church was from 33 AD to 350.
yeah,
And during this time, there was no church buildings,
yeah,
no sermons.
yeah.
That's not exactly true. That's a very like kind of pop culture understanding. Of course, there were buildings. Of course, they were building churches in the first 3 centuries. They weren't maybe as fantastic, and they were meeting in buildings, and people were proclaiming the word and reading scriptures. That's just not really true.
But no singing and no Bible.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
No sermons,
Yeah.
but no singing.
Yeah.
They did sing.
No Bible.
No Bible in the full canon, but there was scripture. Bear, I love you. That is a total misunderstanding of the early church. Like, actually, somewhat egregious misunderstanding that I hope Alex corrects.
Yeah.
And like we get very
He
tied
doesn't.
up in all of those things and the labels and
Yes.
even the phrase Christian.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure where for me it feels quite like man-made, these sort of words.
Yeah, and that is where I can definitely agree with, especially a Christian of your kind, which is to say someone who will say that and recognize that. Because some people place a lot of stock, particularly Catholics, they place a lot of stock in church tradition and the traditions that developed after Nicaea. And I look at that with a similar kind of man-made skepticism. And I think to myself, yeah, like it also gives me license to, when I look at the New Testament and I think, some scholars think that Paul maybe didn't write that letter and that's a big problem. But for someone like me, it's like, who cares? If I decide that Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, then I'll just look at the rest of it and I'll try to work out.
Right. And just because maybe Paul didn't write a letter that's attributed to him, it's a practice called pseudepigraphy, doesn't mean it's not scripture, right? Like a lot of people get really torn up about that. It's like Paul has to have written it, or it's not scripture, or it calls it into question or something. It's like, no, it doesn't. So that's not really important. I will say this kind of pop. I will say Bear Grylls has kind of this pop understanding, I think, of the faith, which is fine. He's a person of strong faith, but it's this kind of like new age, like we don't need labels, we don't need the institution. It's just really just about following Christ. And that's all well and good, but it really does fall apart at a certain point. Like institutional church is actually incredibly important, mostly because Jesus founded an institutional church, and it was run that way from the early days. And so that's how the apostles wanted it to run. And so institutions help keep order and provide structure to the faith. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I understand why people are skeptical of it.
What came between the lines? A good friend of mine said to me once, when there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things. we can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for
Of
example,
course.
have you heard of the Churchillian drift,
Mm.
where like quotes get attributed to Churchill, even though he
Yeah.
never said them? Same thing
Yeah.
happens with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes
Mm.
that he never actually said, but that people believed he said.
Mm.
You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill
So that's
was.
worst case scenario. You still get a
Exactly.
pretty good.
You're still getting
Yeah.
an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and like, well, did Jesus really say that? Was this
Yeah, and there's like a lot of scholarship around like called the Jesus Seminar, which I think is total bunk because it's basically guessing. Like you don't really know. There's no way to prove what Jesus said and what he really didn't say, right? Like at a certain point, you're trusting in faith that at the very least, the principles and the words that are recorded in the gospel are principles that Jesus taught, right? And I'm sure the vast majority of it were verbatim actual words that are passed down, right? So it's just kind of a bunk exercise. And I think, frankly, a waste of time to try to figure out what Jesus actually said, because even I'm trying to find a way that really is a good use of time, because it's I look, and there's no one ever going to watch this channel who was a part of the Jesus Seminar, but if you were, I'm trying not to be like, I'm trying not to be mean, but like, I just really don't see how that's not a waste of time, right? Like you can't ever prove it really anyway. How are you supposed to determine what he said and what he didn't say? And even if you were somehow able to determine Jesus didn't say 20% of the things that are recorded in the Gospels, there's still principles in which he taught. So why does it even really matter?
this an interpolation, blah, blah, blah? Is this a translation thing?
Mm.
But the thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is like, who was this guy and what was he doing to call?
Yeah, a study of who Jesus was and his life and the things around him are not a waste of time, right? Like we can learn more about the Gospels by learning more about the figure and the time in which he lived. But whether or not he said this word or that word, it's like, I don't know if that's useful.
Cause all of this, even if
Yeah.
it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there,
Mm.
the fact that this scramble to write all of this down and
Yeah.
turn it into
Even with the drift.
exactly, it's still
I think you
extremely
would-
interesting.
If we could time travel,
Yeah,
you would be one of the rough gang. So would I.
yeah.
I don't think you'd be. I mean, even though you kind of like the headlines have used like, professor sort of Oxford. Well, are you a professor?
I'm not a professor, no.
You're very clever. Do you know what I mean? That could potentially like put you into the Pharisee type thing.
Right.
But you are the opposite. You are what you would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah, I like
And,
what you say.
And also, I sort of
Okay, so I want you to notice something here, and this is really important because I'm not going to debate here. I want you to notice something. What Bear Grylls does is what all good Christians do and mature Christians do. Instead of, it's almost pastoral what he's doing here, but he's connecting with Alex through wit, but he's also noticing something within him. He's saying, Alex, as much as you don't intellectually assent to this, I bet you would have run wild with Jesus, because he's like, I can tell there's something in you that is deeply fascinated with who he is. And that in and of itself is admirable. And it's something that should be lauded, even though you haven't made the intellectual and faith step yet, right? And what that really does is it connects you to the person. It communicates from Bear to Alex that I don't value you any less or more because you're an atheist or an agnostic. I value you because you're a child of God, and I'm going to treat you like I would treat anybody else. And so this is a sign of mature discipleship, typically. Somebody who can try to connect with somebody regardless of their belief system and really listen to them, but not only listen, but be willing to speak a word of encouragement into them about what they see. And paying attention to the good things that they see in the person. It's really, really important. It's a pretty advanced discipleship skill. I don't think most people, it's not something that they do often.
always got the feel with Jesus. He loved the challenge. He loved the
Yeah.
riposte. He loved the the mental, verbal, like
Yeah.
theological
There's
challenges.
a lot of jousting, yeah, a lot
A
of
lot of
debate.
jousting and brilliant sort of responses that have never been better. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's in like, should we pay our taxes to Caesar or not? You know, the
Yeah.
Pharisees are trying to trip him up.
Yeah.
And yet sort of that response of just like, well, whose head is on the coin? You know,
Yeah.
pay to him and pay to God what is God. It's sort of brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
It is. And it's brilliant because Jesus is God. So, yes, Jesus has, he's one person with a divine will and a human will, yes. And so, but he is clever and smart because he's the God of all of the universe, right? And so he's able to see through, he is a human and has those human experiences, but his divine nature can also see through the cloud and the fog that humans just can't. And so he was able to really do these teachings that have never been bested since. Right? Love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. That's madness, right? But deep in our human soul, it resonates with us because deep in our human soul, we know that's true. And it's true because God says it's true, but like it is intellectual madness to love your enemies, but it resonated because deep in our heart of hearts, something stirs in us that knows it's true because God made us. And Jesus was speaking. It was like the world was in a fog, and when Jesus spoke, he blew the fog away. It was like the sun came out and the fog disappeared, right? His teachings struck to the core of the human experience because he's God.
a
And
brilliant
I
story.
would think that I see a beautiful alignment actually. I think if we would go back in time travel, you'd be running wild with him.
Well, if the science ever gets there and we manage to go back in time, when people say, where would you go?
Yeah,
forward in time,
where would
backward in
you
time?
go? Come on, what would you do?
Of course you'd go to meet Jesus.
I
Of course
love
you
it.
would.
What point? Where would you go?
I
Would you go
wouldn't.
after the resurrection, or would you want to be there at the beginning? What about in the 17 years?
I wouldn't, because obviously this is theoretical and time travel is probably impossible, right? I wouldn't, because then you're removing the faith element out of it and it cheapens it, I think.
It's interesting. I think that the moment that you'd want to witness if you could only have 5 minutes would be the moment of the crucifixion. And the reason is that you would see that this was a man, the crucifixion happened, you would see whether the curtain tore, whether the sky opened, all of
Yes.
that kind of stuff. And it would give you all of that. I mean,
But they keep finding evidence for like the, I think in the sort of, the star stuff and they said there was a
oh yeah,
scientist-
like the solar eclipse.
the solar eclipse that I've actually done. It's the exact kind of like
That's
time.
really-
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that right, it makes sense when, he's talking about like they've been looking at like the idea of like the Star of Bethlehem being like a nova or a supernova, right? This idea that around the time of Jesus's birth, there was a supernova in the sky that stayed bright for months and guided wise men. So that became a part of the gospel story and it guided them, right? Like there are tons of ways in which God can use the natural world to guide people and create inspiring stories that reveals himself to us.
really interesting.
It's
Isn't it?
really interesting. And also that moment is kind of also to see the first ever Roman Christian. Well,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the centurion
Truly, this
going,
is the
truly son of God.
Yeah.
This man is the son of God.
But then part of
That's
me would,
interesting. You go to that moment. That's kind of cool.
but part of me would say, although, you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry
Yes.
and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
Yes. Are you the real deal?
Are you Messiah? Are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what
Yes.
I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question.
Of course, Jesus would look at him and probably say, "You say that I am. Why is it that you're asking that question? Something stirs inside of you that you want to know the truth, and it would not stir within you if it were not true."
And I mean, where would you go in Jesus' life? You get 5 minutes.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I think,
That dog.
so, I mean, if you think of the biblical, so there are a lot of people that did get that chance and did it come exactly for that purpose.
Mhm.
Say, I mean, one bit you might not have noticed that I really like
Mm.
is John the Baptist's relationship with Jesus. We
Mm.
kind of touched on it, but there's a really nice moment where if you think if anyone in the Jesus orbit
Yeah.
is going to believe in him,
Yeah.
it's John the Baptist.
Of course.
Known him from birth, kicking inside my mother's stomach whenever Jesus walked in the room. Like, I know this guy is a real deal. I'm baptizing the River Jordan, saying there was one is coming after me is like, I know. And yet when he was in Herod's prison and he gets a chance to get a message to his disciples, the one thing he says is go back to Yeshua and just ask him, you really are who you say you are.
Mm.
Is it you?
And I love that because like, if even John the Baptist had doubts because of he's like being tortured and in a brutal prison and like we're human, then I can have doubts. And it's like, he's been a real hero of mine, actually, John the Baptist.
Me too. I think he's my favorite person.
Well, it's interesting you say.
Yeah. As a voice crying out in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, right? John the Baptist has a really important role to play to prepare spiritually. He helps spiritually prepare the poor and the peasants for the coming of the Messiah, right? He's baptizing people. He's calling for the repentance of sin. And he's the one who points to Jesus. Even in the midst of his doubts, he knows deep inside that his cousin is the Son of God.
So
I'd be interested what I like about him is that everyone always, Jesus says there's no one being greater.
Yes.
He is the number one in the prophets.
That's
number
right.
one. And I always think we think to be number one in life, you've got to be like a leader. You got to be like, I would think Moses or one of these people, like on top of the mountain, the big beard, the loud voice, the authority. It's how we're brought up to think these are our people in our lives who are the leaders. And yet it was the rough one who lived off the land and was wild and just loved this Yeshua character. Yeah. And he said, no one better. Why do you like him?
I think he's fascinating because he seems to be this sort of precursor to Jesus in a weird way. He's the introduction to Jesus. There's a bit of mystery as to who he was and why he was baptizing and why he found his way into the wilderness and what it means to preach a baptism for the repentance of sins and why Jesus would need to undergo that. All of these questions are so interesting. There are also communities of people who particularly revere John the Baptist. There's a group called the Mandaeans who are like this Gnostic sect who think that John the Baptist is the most important prophet. Now they see Jesus as a false prophet. Actually, there's this whole historical like fascination with John the Baptist because he's and it's also the insistence early on that he is not the Messiah. You do it
he
in
keeps
the book
saying,
as well.
I'm not the guy.
Which implies to me that at the time there were lots of people who thought he was the Messiah. And
because that's what happens. People want to think somebody's great, and then the power goes to your head.
And when Herod Antipas first hears about Jesus, he goes,
"Nice job." He delineated Herod Antipas. That's impressive, actually. Of course, Herod the Great is king when Jesus is born. Antipas when he is doing his ministry, and then Herod Agrippa, I believe, is the king during like the Book of Acts.
This guy is John the Baptist reborn in the Gospels. And so what was John the Baptist doing if when he hears this Jesus guy, it reminds him of John? So it seems like John the Baptist had this incredible ministry and he must have been doing all kinds of interesting things and there were all kinds of people who thought he was the Messiah. And so, and we only get clues to that in the Gospels. And so I'd be fascinated. Do you know what? Maybe I'd go to the baptism because I'd love to meet John the Baptist.
Yeah.
Well, the sky open.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see too.
Because if you see that, then you know. Because you can't fake that, So in a way, that's as convincing as the resurrection. Because if you're there and you literally see this guy up in the voice of God going, this is my son.
And the dove, you kind of get a proof of the Trinity.
Well, it's like...
You get to meet John, and you get to see Jesus. It's all there. I think
you know what?
that
They
might be
all
the
saw
moment.
all these things. And yet still the next
still,
day, they would go, well,
not so sure.
The clouds could have... And was it thunder that sounded? And that dove, there had been a few doves around that day.
Never enough. What I do know, though, is that I speak to a lot of interesting people. I speak to some scientists. If I ever meet one who tells me that they're onto something with time travel, I'll know who to call to go back and meet John the Baptist.
I love that. A really good video. It's interesting how when people really start to explore the story of Jesus and they resonated with it, what I really liked in that debate was kind of the back and forth about with Bear and the way he was interacting with Alex, and really see him light. You see Alex light up when he's talking about these characters, and so that's how it starts, right? People explore, and I think one of the best things we can do is just let people explore. Don't try to be like, come home to Rome, bro, to the Catholic Church, or like time to convert or whatever it is. No, we just keep talking to people and saying, look, you're exploring this and really coming to resonate with these characters. And the reason you're resonating with them is because they're real and they're witnessing to the light of Christ, right? Especially John the Baptist, right? John chapter 1 says he was himself not the light, but came to testify to the light. So yeah, really, really good video. Really, really enjoyed that. Christianity is more plausible than most people think. When you really do the evidence, look at the evidence, the first century, the amount of manuscripts and documents we have from only, a few decades after the purported events, which compared to events in world history, we have much less. And just the movement itself, the fact that the movement became what it was, right? And as fast as it did, and how it evolved out of a Jewish community is unlikely unless there was some sort of miraculous event to change the lives and the hearts of hundreds, if not thousands of people at once. And so, Christianity is more plausible than you think. Really, really good video. Make sure you go like and subscribe to that channel, Alex's channel. He puts out some good content, but make sure to like and subscribe to my channel as well. If you haven't yet, make sure to do so if you liked the content for today. But until next time, I'm Reverend Matt and I'm the Connectionalist. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.